Hey everybody, it's time for Avian First Aid, episode 13. This is a continuation from the last episode. Dr. Gordy will tell us how she extracts the egg.
Sometimes you can extract an egg manually, and so what you would do in that situation is your egg is right here, your cloaca is right here. After you have your bird stabilized, you can put just a little bit of pressure in this area with your thumbs pushing down and your fingers just preventing the egg from going from side to side. And usually I will hold for 3 seconds and then release. If you keep pressure on it all the time, that's too painful for the bird, and the pain might be too much for them. So you're like giving them contractions, right? You do the 3 seconds and then you release. 3 seconds and then you release. And you should see progression of that egg. Like it should drop down. You should see this little white circle with red cloaca around it. And then as you do that, the cloaca should open up and allow the egg to come out. If it's too dry, then I take a Q-tip that's moistened in saline and I roll the cloaca back along the egg to allow it to open up. Often, once you get it started rolling, it just opens and closes, and then away goes your egg. Watch your bird when you're doing that, because that's quite stressful for them. And if you see that bird is kind of closing her eyes and looking like she's breathing too hard, then that might not be the best choice. If I can't manually extract an egg, or if I don't think I should because I felt it and it's so big that I don't think it's possible, then the next option is to collapse the egg. And the way you do that is you take a fairly large syringe and a fairly large gauge needle, because what you're going to do is you're going to poke inside the egg and you're going to suck out the contents of the egg. And because egg white and egg yolk is quite thick, you can't choose a teensy little needle because it won't go through there. So it may look ugly and big, but a big needle goes in and you suck out the contents of the egg. Once the contents of the egg are removed, then the shell will usually collapse quite easily, and that makes it small enough that then it can pass. The disadvantage of that is that occasionally a sharp edge of shell will cut the uterus. I've never had that happen, but it can. Usually it doesn't, because the shell collapses in once you've taken the contents of the egg out. Once you collapse it, then I don't immediately try and extract it. Then I give that bird calcium and fluids and let it sit on its own, and usually they will pass it on their own. It can take anywhere from an hour to a day to come out, but once the uterus isn't contracting around that big egg all the time, then the bird can relax. That crunched up shell can sit in there for, I think my all-time record was a month before the bird passed it. But that bird had uterine pathology, and the shell was way too thick. It was like a reptile egg almost. It wasn't like a normal egg. Anyway, it came out a month later. But that makes the bird stable because they're not contracting against this egg all the time, right? So, and often the reason it doesn't come out is they have pathology somewhere else. Maybe they have a hernia and their abdominal muscles aren't strong enough anymore. Maybe they have been laying too many eggs and they don't have enough calcium. So if you do your supportive care, then often they can pass it on their own. And the third way that you can get an egg out would be doing a surgical cesarean. And I've never seen this done except on a lecture I went to where it was an extremely rare species of bird and they wanted to save the egg and incubate it to propagate the species. And the prevention for egg binding is good nutrition. Like when they start laying eggs, they need to have supplemental calcium, and pay attention to how many they lay. Cockatiels in particular tend to be really prolific egg layers, and they will lay more than they should. A normal clutch or a normal amount of eggs for a cockatiel would be 12 in a year, and they don't usually do it one a month. They usually do a group of 3 to 7, and then another group of 3 to 7. I've had cockatiels in my practice that do 24 to 40 in a year. In those ones, you can do things to make it less inviting for them to lay eggs. You can rearrange their cage so that they don't feel like it's a good safe area to have eggs. You can be a little bit careful with their nutrition with respect to not overfeeding them. Cockatiels that have really an abundance of food are more likely to lay than ones that are on a normal diet. So an overweight cockatiel, now it's overweight and it's laying eggs. And then there's also hormone injections that you can do to slow down egg laying. So that's the prevention for egg binding.